Millfield, Ohio, a town so quiet even the winds seemed to whisper in hushed tones. White picket fences lined the sleepy streets. Church bells rang on Sundays, and neighbors still waved at one another. It was the kind of place where darkness wasn't supposed to exist, at least not in the open. But hidden behind the ordinary smiles and freshly cut lawns of this town was a secret so foul, so horrifying, it would shatter every illusion of safety that Millfield ever held. At the center of this nightmare was the Isenberg family, a close-knit household that never raised suspicion. Deborah, the mother, worked at the town's library. Nathan, the oldest son, was a local mechanic. Emily, the teenage daughter, was still in high school. And then there was Caleb. Caleb Isenberg was quiet. Maybe too quiet. The kind of quiet that people mistake for shyness. Withdrawn, pale, and always drifting off into his own thoughts. He was the one nobody really noticed. He rarely left the house. He didn't attend college or hold a steady job. He told his family he was figuring life out. To them, he was just their awkward little brother who needed time. But behind his bedroom door, and later, behind a trapdoor none of them knew existed, Caleb was becoming something else entirely, something monstrous. It all began, or at least the family believes it did, when Caleb turned 22. His personality darkened. He started spending long hours locked in the garage. When asked, he would brush it off as art projects or personal reflection. Deborah, the ever-patient mother, never pushed. Nathan was too busy working double shifts. And Emily? Well, Emily was just a kid caught in the swirl of adolescence. But the smell, that unbearable stench, was the first real clue. Neighbors began complaining of a rotting odor coming from the Isenberg property. Animal carcasses, garbage, maybe a dead raccoon under the deck. That's what everyone assumed. The family chalked it up to old pipes or something Caleb might have left in the garage fridge. After all, he was a bit messy. No one imagined it was human remains. Nathan was the first to truly question things. He returned home one evening, bone-tired from a 12-hour shift, and saw Caleb exiting the garage at 2 a.m., sweating, twitching, and dragging something heavy wrapped in black plastic. Nathan called out to him. Caleb flinched but smiled nervously, muttering something about donation boxes for the shelter. Nathan shrugged it off. He had learned not to ask too many questions. Family gives each other space, right? But it wasn't space Caleb needed. It was secrecy. Days later, Nathan's suspicions grew. His tools started going missing. Odd red smears appeared on the garage door. The freezer, one Caleb insisted was off limits, was locked with a chain. Then came the moment that changed everything. Emily, looking for her cat Muffin, followed a strange noise into the garage and noticed a corner of the concrete floor sounded hollow. Nathan investigated the next day. He grabbed a crowbar and began prying at the slab. What he uncovered wasn't just a trap door. It was a descent into horror. Beneath the garage was a hidden room, about 8 feet below ground, carved crudely into the earth. It smelled of bleach, rust, and something else, something sickly sweet. The walls were lined with hooks. There were bones, photographs, jars filled with preserved organs. And in the center, on a rusted steel table, was something Nathan would never unsee, a severed human arm, half-eaten, left beside a dinner plate. Nathan collapsed. He called 911. What followed was a storm of sirens, flashing lights, and hushed whispers that swept across Millfield like wildfire. Caleb didn't resist arrest. He stood there, eerily calm, as officers dragged him out of the house. No outburst, no denial, just one haunting sentence. They were already dead inside. I just finished the job. What did he mean? Who were the victims? How had the family not known? This was not just another gruesome crime. This was betrayal at the deepest level. A family member living among them, sharing meals, watching TV, while hiding body parts under their garage. The media swarmed. Reporters flooded Millfield. The Isenberg name, once quietly known among neighbors, was now a national headline. Deborah collapsed during questioning. Emily was taken into protective custody, and Nathan, who discovered it all, would forever be haunted by the image of that underground chamber, a hellhole hiding beneath the very place they parked their car. But this story isn't just about horror. It's about trust broken, innocence stolen, and the thin, fragile line between ordinary life and the unthinkable. This is The Untold Trace, and I am your host. We dive into the dark corners most fear to explore. And in the Isenberg case, the darkness wasn't in a faraway alley or a stranger's basement. It was at home. It wore familiar clothes. It shared your last name. Stay with us, because what you've heard so far is only the beginning. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and stay tuned, because the real horror of Caleb Isenberg is about to unfold. To understand how someone like Caleb Isenberg could become a monster hiding in plain sight, we have to rewind time. Years before the hidden room, before the severed limbs and police raids, before the headlines. The truth didn't begin in that underground chamber. It began in the cracks no one noticed, or perhaps chose to ignore. The Isenberg family had never been what you'd call wealthy. After the father, Michael Isenberg, died in a car accident when Caleb was just 11, the family spiraled into survival mode. Deborah, now a single mother of 3, worked tirelessly at the local library to make ends meet. Nathan, the eldest, grew up fast, taking odd jobs by the time he was 16 just to help keep food on the table. Emily, still a toddler, barely remembers those chaotic early years. And then there was Caleb. Something changed in him after their father died. He stopped speaking for weeks. He stopped eating. Teachers noticed a difference. Once a curious, creative child, Caleb became quiet, disconnected, and withdrawn. He'd sit in the back of the classroom, doodling strange figures or staring out the window for hours. Counselors suggested therapy, but the family couldn't afford it. And besides, Deborah believed in pushing through pain, not talking about it. Time heals all wounds, she'd often say. Except time didn't heal Caleb. It twisted him. At school, Caleb was the target of relentless bullying. His awkwardness, his poor hygiene, his habit of muttering to himself, all of it made him a magnet for cruelty. Rumors began to circulate. Some students claimed he dissected frogs and birds behind the gym. Others said they saw him digging holes in the woods behind the school. Most thought it was just teenage legend making. But the truth? Some of it was disturbingly real. By the time he turned 16, Caleb had completely shut himself off from the outside world. He didn't go to prom, didn't date, didn't have friends. His room, according to Nathan, looked more like a storage closet than a bedroom. Posters of anatomy diagrams, books on body decomposition, and shelves lined with animal skulls. He said it was a phase, an interest in science. But even science had its limits. One time, Deborah found a journal in Caleb's drawer. The cover was leather, and scratched into the front were the words, "The Real Me." Inside were pages of drawings, grotesque sketches of mutilated bodies, limbs being consumed, faces twisted in agony. Caleb claimed it was just art. Nathan argued they should confront him. Deborah refused. She was terrified of what it might mean. And in her fear, she made the most fatal mistake a parent can make. She looked away. Meanwhile, Nathan continued to carry the weight of the family. He worked long hours at the garage, trying to keep bills paid and Emily in school. He barely had time to process Caleb's behavior, let alone investigate it. To him, Caleb was weird, yes, but dangerous? That never crossed his mind. They were brothers, and brothers protect each other, right? But Caleb wasn't looking for protection. He was looking for a way to hide, and the family, unintentionally, gave him the perfect cover. At 18, Caleb refused to go to college. He said he wanted to stay home and learn from the real world. Deborah, still grieving and exhausted, allowed it. He rarely left the house, often staying up all night in the garage or the basement. He claimed he was working on sculptures, pieces that explore the fragility of flesh. The lie was elegant. No one questioned it. Around this time, local authorities noticed a chilling trend. A handful of homeless individuals had gone missing in Millfield over the past 18 months. Because they had no families to file reports and no addresses to trace, the disappearances were logged but never deeply investigated. No one could have imagined they were connected to Caleb Isenberg. No one connected the smell, the shadows, the growing darkness inside the Isenberg house. The first real red flag, the one that should have blown the whole story open, came 2 years before Caleb's arrest. Emily had a sleepover. Her friend Rachel accidentally opened the wrong door while looking for the bathroom and found herself in Caleb's room. What she saw there haunted her. A taxidermied dog nailed to the wall, photographs of what looked like corpses, blurred and red-soaked, a bucket filled with animal entrails. She told Emily, who told Nathan. Nathan confronted Caleb that night. Caleb laughed it off. "It's fake," he insisted. "Props from a horror set I'm working on." And incredibly, everyone believed him. Or at least they wanted to, because facing the truth meant accepting that their own brother, the boy they grew up with, might be a predator hiding under their roof. The town of Millfield had no idea that one of the most horrific criminal minds in recent American history was being incubated in silence, right in their midst. Caleb's descent didn't happen in one dramatic moment. It was slow, like mold spreading behind drywall, unseen but toxic. He started studying books on cannibalistic tribes, Nazi experimentation, and serial killers. His YouTube history, later recovered by investigators, was a dark, disturbing playlist of dissection tutorials, survivalist gore forms, and murder confessions. He wasn't just fascinated, he was planning. In hindsight, there were signs everywhere. The constant locked freezer, the blackout curtains, the rotting meat smell that never quite went away. But in small-town America, people trust their neighbors. Families don't want to believe their loved ones are monsters. They'd rather sleep next to danger than wake up in horror. And so Caleb's secret grew, fed by silence, denial, and darkness. It wasn't until Emily's cat disappeared that things began to unravel. Muffin was her emotional support animal, a gift from their late father. She adored that cat. It never strayed far. But one night, Muffin vanished. Emily cried for days. She searched the house top to bottom. And then one evening, she noticed something strange, the faint sound of scratching beneath the garage floor. She told Nathan, who was already suspicious of Caleb's behavior. This time, Nathan didn't ignore it. He waited for Caleb to leave the house, then grabbed a crowbar and flashlight. What he found beneath the garage would change everything, not just for their family, but for the entire town of Millfield. But that moment, that horrifying discovery, we already talked about it. What we haven't talked about yet, what the world would soon learn after Caleb's arrest, were the horrifying details of what he did to his victims, how he selected them, and why he claimed their pain was a gift to the void. Those revelations were just beginning. The trap door beneath the Isenberg family garage had sealed away something far worse than any of them could have imagined. What Nathan found when he pried it open wasn't just evidence of murder, it was a museum of madness, a grotesque shrine to Caleb's true identity. And the deeper investigators went into that room, the more they realized they weren't dealing with a man who lost control. They were dealing with someone who planned every moment of terror. The room was barely lit, just a single flickering bulb dangling from the ceiling. The walls were raw concrete, stained with substances no forensic team could fully identify. In one corner sat a butcher's table, rusted and wet, with human tissue still clinging to the edges. In another, a large steel sink clogged with hair and what appeared to be bone fragments. There were meat hooks, chains, surgical knives, jars, dozens of them, filled with preserved eyeballs, tongues, and sections of human flesh floating in yellowed fluid. Pinned to a bulletin board were Polaroids, hundreds of them, faces twisted in fear, some already lifeless. Most were unidentifiable. There were notes scribbled in red marker across the photos. Too salty. Didn't scream. Perfect marbling. When authorities began cataloging the space, they stopped calling it a kill room. They called it the pantry. Caleb had transformed that underground space into something out of a horror novel. But this was no fiction. The blood was real. The victims were real. and the method, chillingly precise. Forensics uncovered DNA from at least 9 different individuals in the room. All of them matched missing persons reports from the surrounding counties, mostly transients, addicts, and the homeless. People no one had searched for. Caleb targeted those who would not be missed. He stalked them through online forums, soup kitchens, and bus stations. Some were lured in with promises of food or shelter. Others were simply taken off the street, never to be seen again. And the most horrifying part? He ate them. Investigators found freezers packed with vacuum-sealed human meat, carefully labeled. Ribs, thighs, heart, tongue. Some were seasoned, others marinated. One container was marked with the word Sunday roast. There was also a diary, not a confession, not a breakdown of guilt, but a manifesto. In it, Caleb wrote at length about his obsession with purity through consumption. He claimed that society breeds hollow souls, and that to consume the essence of the forgotten is to inherit their truth. These weren't the ramblings of a mentally unstable man. They were methodical, chilling, and deeply philosophical in their own twisted way. In one entry, dated just months before his arrest, Caleb wrote, "They look at me and see nothing. An invisible man. But when I take them, when I taste them, I become more real than any of them will ever be. They fade, I absorb, I evolve." There was no remorse, no regret, just cold detachment and a disturbing sense of superiority. The town of Millfield erupted in panic as the details emerged. Reporters camped outside the Isenberg home. Psychologists debated on air whether Caleb was schizophrenic, psychopathic, or a new category entirely. Protesters gathered, demanding answers from law enforcement. How could this happen? How did no one notice? But the hardest questions weren't for the police. They were for the family. How do you live with someone for years and not see the signs? How do you share meals, pass them the salt, say goodnight, never knowing that just feet away they were storing human remains? Nathan, now both a witness and a victim of this trauma, struggled publicly and privately. In interviews, his hands would shake as he spoke. His voice often cracked. "He was my little brother," he said. "I changed his diapers. I took him to school. And the whole time I didn't know I was living with a monster." Emily, still a minor, was removed from the home immediately after Caleb's arrest. She was placed in protective counseling and given a new school placement. She hasn't spoken to the press, but court records show she now refuses to say her last name. The word Isenberg haunts her. And Deborah was crushed, not by the public, but by guilt. "I didn't protect him," she told one local reporter. "But worse, I didn't protect the people he hurt. I told myself he was just quiet. I told myself he was just different. I didn't want to believe my son could be evil." Caleb's arrest marked only the beginning of the legal storm. Investigators combed through his online activity, which led them to even more disturbing findings. He had an anonymous blog called The Silent Feast, where he posted graphic stories of dismemberment and recipes for human flesh, thinly veiled as horror fiction. But the images he posted were real. Photos taken inside the pantry, images of his actual victims, edited and filtered for a disturbing online audience. The site had followers. Some comments praised his creativity. Others asked questions about texture. A few offered tips. The FBI began opening investigations into Caleb's potential links with underground cannibal forums, a dark, hidden part of the internet where similar crimes may have been discussed or encouraged. But back in Millfield, the town was paralyzed by fear and shame. Local stores took down the Isenberg name from any customer boards. The library where Deborah worked closed for a week. Parents warned their children never to talk to strangers, even those they had known for years. The psychological toll of the case extended far beyond the crime scene. It seeped into every corner of Millfield. Trust eroded. Safety became an illusion. The trial was scheduled 6 months after Caleb's arrest, but Caleb never made it to the courtroom. 3 weeks before his first hearing, he was found in his jail cell, hanging by his bedsheet, a torn page from his manifesto stuffed into his mouth. The coroner ruled it a suicide, but some believe he was silenced. Others think it was his final act of control, a way to escape judgment and leave the world with unanswered questions. That manifesto page, it read, "The feast is over, but the hunger remains." Authorities never found all the victims. Some of the remains discovered in his underground chamber were too decomposed to identify. Others may never be recovered. It's possible that Caleb's full victim count is far higher than 9. As the media circus faded and Millfield tried to return to something resembling normal, a bitter truth remained. Caleb Isenberg didn't just kill. He transformed from a grieving boy into a methodical predator, right under the noses of the people who loved him. And the scariest part? He could be anyone, anywhere. A face in the crowd, a brother, a neighbor, a son. Like, comment, and subscribe to help us uncover more horrifying true stories the world would rather forget. And remember, evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a familiar smile. This is the Untold Trace. After Caleb Isenberg was dragged out of the family's garage in handcuffs, the world around the Isenbergs collapsed. Quickly, violently, and without mercy. Within hours, the once quiet suburban home in Millfield, Ohio, transformed into the epicenter of a national media frenzy. Satellite vans lined the block, drones buzzed overhead, reporters with long lenses and louder voices camped outside for days, desperate for a shot of the House of Horror. The story wasn't just horrifying, it was contagious. Because this wasn't just about murder. This was about family, a boy turned butcher, a brother who shared breakfast while hiding a body beneath their feet, a mother who loved a monster. And in that dissonance, in the betrayal of normalcy, America found its obsession. The Isenbergs became prisoners in their own lives. Deborah couldn't go back to the library. Her co-workers avoided her. Parents refused to let her read at children's story time. Rumors swirled that she must have helped Caleb, that no mother could be that blind. Her eyes became hollow in interviews, her voice barely audible, clinging to a reality that no longer existed. Nathan, once seen as the working-class backbone of the family, was now the man who lived next to evil and never noticed. Talk radio hosts called him willfully blind. Internet sleuths dissected every interview he gave, analyzing his posture, tone, and expressions. He knew, they whispered. He had to know. But Nathan was drowning. Not just in public judgment, but in guilt. He'd replay the discovery over and over in his mind. The trap door, the flickering light, the steel table, the stench that coated his skin for days. He couldn't scrub it away. He couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the arm on the plate, the fork beside it. He started drinking again. One night he showed up outside the now condemned family home, screaming at no one, begging Caleb's ghost to answer him. Police detained him, but no charges were filed. Just a note: severe emotional trauma. Emily, the youngest, was silenced not by force but by fear. Taken into state care, then placed with extended family in another county, she changed her name and stopped using social media altogether. Her school records were sealed. Even the most dogged journalists couldn't find her. But a leaked school counselor's report later revealed chilling notes from one of her sessions. She says the house still smells like him. She wakes up thinking he's standing in the doorway, holding a plate. She refuses to eat anything red. The psychological fallout extended beyond the family. Millfield, once a picture-perfect town, became infamous overnight. Businesses suffered, tourism died, home values plummeted. House of the Cannibal tours started popping up on YouTube. Conspiracy channels claimed the entire family was part of a secret cult. A mural outside the church was defaced with the words, "Blood runs beneath us." But the real damage was deeper, invisible, and permanent. The legal process moved slowly at first. Caleb was held without bail, charged with multiple counts of murder, desecration of corpses, and, most chilling of all, cannibalism. Prosecutors promised the public a trial unlike anything the state had ever seen. Psychiatrists were called in to evaluate him. One described Caleb as completely lucid, disturbingly intelligent, and emotionally frozen. But he refused to cooperate. In every interrogation, he remained silent, staring, unblinking. Not in fear, but in a kind of quiet arrogance. He would not offer an explanation. He would not beg for forgiveness. He would not say why. Until one day, he did. In a rare recorded moment, Caleb leaned toward the camera and whispered, "I just got hungry." He smiled and leaned back into the darkness. The trial never came. Caleb's suicide in jail 3 weeks before his hearing wasn't just the end of his life. It was the beginning of a million unanswered questions. Was it guilt, a final act of control, or something darker? Inside his cell, they found one last drawing, a family dinner table. But the people around it were headless. Only Caleb had a face, and in front of him, a plate piled high with meat. On the bottom corner, in tiny handwriting, it read, "I was never alone." That line ignited a new wave of conspiracy. Did someone help him? Was there another killer? Was the family more involved than they let on? Authorities dismissed the theories. Forensics, they said, proved Caleb acted alone. But truth rarely satisfies the hungry. And in the age of the internet, theories live longer than facts. What remained clear, however, was the devastation Caleb left behind. Several families were finally able to identify their missing loved ones through DNA recovered in the pantry. Most had no idea what happened to their relatives. Many assumed they had simply vanished into the void of homelessness or addiction. One mother, whose son's hand was found beneath Caleb's butcher table, told a local station, "At least now I know where he went. At least now I can bury him." Not everyone got that closure. At least 3 victims remain unidentified. Partial remains, no names, no photos, just entries in a coroner's report labeled Jane Doe 14, male, unknown, age range 2040. Millfield held a vigil 1 month after Caleb's death. Dozens gathered, not just to mourn the victims, but to reclaim the town, to say, "This isn't who we are." But even as candles flickered and prayers were whispered, the shadow lingered. People still locked their doors a little earlier, still avoided the Isenberg property, still looked twice at anyone who seemed off. And that's the real horror of this story. Not just what Caleb did, but what it revealed. That the monsters we fear aren't always hiding in the woods or lurking in the alley. Sometimes they're sitting at the dinner table, wearing your last name. Months passed, then a year. The headlines faded. The reporters left. The tape around the Isenberg home was finally removed, though no one dared cross the threshold. It sat like a carcass at the end of the cul-de-sac, rotting slowly, windows boarded, grass overgrown, the garage forever tainted in local memory. They called it the Hollow House now, because it wasn't just empty, it was hollowed out by secrets, silence, and a truth that left a permanent scar on everyone who came near it. But as the world turned its attention to the next tragedy, the Isenberg case lived on. Not in news cycles, but in whispers, dreams, and the quiet kind of fear that never really leaves you. The people of Millfield changed. You could see it in the way they looked at one another. A nervous glance, a moment of hesitation before a smile, the tightness in their voices when they talked about Caleb, if they talked about him at all. It was as if his crimes had stripped away something sacred, the illusion that we know our neighbors, the comfort that home is always safe, that the people we love couldn't possibly be hiding something so evil. Millfield learned otherwise. The town erected a memorial for the victims. 9 black stones arranged in a circle, one for each identified soul lost beneath Caleb's blade. 3 more smaller stones, blank for the unnamed. Each one bore the inscription, "You were seen, you are remembered." Every year now, on the date of Caleb's arrest, people gather there. Some light candles, others bring photos. A few simply stand in silence. But no one forgets. Not here. Not anymore. Meanwhile, the Isenberg family scattered like ashes in the wind. Deborah Isenberg left Ohio and reportedly moved to Colorado under a new name. Her last public statement came 6 months after Caleb's suicide, in a letter released by her lawyer. It read, "I lost 2 sons, one to the world and one to the darkness inside him. I don't know which loss is heavier, but I pray no other mother ever has to carry this weight." Nathan tried to rebuild. He moved to a new state, changed jobs, and stopped speaking to the press. He was spotted once in a small town in Pennsylvania, working as a mechanic under a different last name. Locals say he keeps to himself, doesn't talk much, but every Sunday he goes to church and sits alone in the back row. Emily, the youngest, is now of legal age. She remains completely off-grid. Her therapists have shared anonymously that she still suffers from night terrors. She refuses to look at family photos, and she's told more than one counselor, "I'll never trust anyone again. Not fully, because I trusted him." The psychological aftershocks of the Isenberg case reached far beyond the family. Mental health hotlines across the state reported a spike in calls following the release of Caleb's diary pages to the public. Schools in Millfield initiated trauma-informed training for teachers. Parents started checking their children's journals, browsing histories, moods, terrified of missing the signs, of raising another Caleb. But what signs do you even look for? That question still haunts experts. Because Caleb Isenberg wasn't the cliché. He wasn't violent in public. He wasn't reckless. He didn't torture animals in front of witnesses. He smiled politely. He kept to himself. He was quiet, clean, respectful, until he wasn't. Psychologists and criminologists continue to study the case in academic journals and lectures. Some argue he was born with a predisposition toward psychopathy. Others believe his father's sudden death triggered unresolved trauma that mutated into something far darker. Some believe the bullying, the isolation, the neglect, all fermented into rage, one that festered silently until it took form in blood. But one thing nearly all experts agree on is this. Caleb Isenberg was a master of hiding in plain sight. And that is what makes him one of the most terrifying domestic killers in recent American memory. He didn't just break the law, he broke the rules of trust. Because how do you come back from something like this? How does a town, a family, a community learn to believe again? The short answer? Some don't. Real estate agents still can't sell the Isenberg house. It sits untouched, crumbling from the inside out. Teenagers dare each other to approach it. Paranormal groups have filmed YouTube videos from the street, claiming to hear screams from the garage. One even recorded what sounded like a fork dropping to the ground inside. Whether truth or dramatization, the myth of the house only grew. Locals began calling it the Mouth, because that's what it became. A place that devoured innocence, that swallowed victims, that chewed up a family from the inside. But even in darkness, there were moments of resistance. A young artist from Millfield, whose brother was among the unidentified victims, began painting a mural near the local bus stop. It showed faces, not of killers, but of the lost. Eyes wide, filled with light. The message beneath read, "We are more than what was done to us." It became a rallying point for healing. A place where people could stand, breathe, and feel that maybe, just maybe, the story wasn't only about horror. Maybe it was about survival. Because the truth is, the Isenberg case will never have a clean ending. Caleb took that with him when he died. He left wounds too deep for closure, questions too dark for answers, and a legacy so chilling it forces every viewer, every listener, every stranger watching this story unfold, to ask themselves a question they may not be ready for. Who do I really know? The brother who keeps to himself. The neighbor who never makes eye contact. The quiet one at the dinner table. We want to believe we'd see it, that we'd know. But the truth? So did the Isenbergs. Like, comment, and subscribe to support our mission of uncovering the stories buried in silence. And if this case has shaken you, good. That means you're still human. Because this has been the Untold Trace, and some traces never disappear.